Story 1. The Repeating Mile. Robert Hayes had been driving 18-wheelers for 23 years when he encountered something on Interstate 40 that fundamentally changed his understanding of reality. It was May of 2023, and he was hauling a load of electronics from Oklahoma City to Little Rock, a route he had driven hundreds of times before. The night was clear, temperature hovering around 60 degrees, and his CB radio crackled with the usual chatter from other drivers making their way across the dark Arkansas landscape. Robert prided himself on being a practical man. He kept meticulous logs, maintained his rig to perfection, and never drove beyond his hours. His Kenworth W900 was his second home, equipped with everything he needed for long hauls, including a GPS unit, 2 CB radios, and a phone mount. He knew every truck stop, every rest area, and every quirk of the highways between Texas and Tennessee. Nothing surprised him anymore, or so he thought. He entered Arkansas just after midnight, the kind of witching hour when the highway belongs to truckers and ghosts. Mile marker 142 passed on his right, illuminated briefly by his headlights before disappearing into the darkness behind him. The road stretched ahead, empty and infinite, cutting through dense forest on both sides. His GPS showed him exactly where he was, the blue dot moving steadily along the red line toward his destination. Everything was normal. Everything was routine. Then he saw mile marker 142 again. At first, Robert thought he had misread it. Fatigue could play tricks on the eyes, even though he had only been driving for 4 hours since his last rest stop. But when mile marker 142 appeared a third time, exactly 1 minute after the second sighting, his hands tightened on the steering wheel. His GPS still showed forward progress. The odometer still counted miles. But the same marker kept appearing with mechanical regularity. Robert grabbed his CB radio. "This is Nighthawk to any drivers on Interstate 40 eastbound near mile 142. Anyone else seeing anything strange out here?" Static answered him. He switched channels and tried again. Nothing but white noise. He checked his phone. No signal, which was unusual but not unheard of in rural Arkansas. But his GPS worked fine, satellite signal strong, showing him moving forward at a steady 65 miles per hour. Mile marker 142 appeared again. And again. And again. The panic started as a cold spot in his chest, spreading outward like ice water through his veins. Robert slowed down, watching his speedometer drop to 50, then 40. The mile marker still appeared at the same interval. He sped up to 75. Same result. The timing never changed. Every 60 seconds, mile marker 142 emerged from the darkness ahead, passed on his right, and vanished behind him, only to reappear 60 seconds later. He checked his mirrors. The road behind him looked normal, stretching back into darkness. The white lines, the trees, everything appeared as it should. But he was trapped in a single mile of highway, repeating endlessly like a vinyl record with a scratch. Robert tried to rationalize it. Maybe he had fallen asleep and this was a dream. He pinched his arm hard enough to leave marks. The pain was real. The leather of his steering wheel felt real under his palms. The hum of his engine sounded perfectly normal, but mile marker 142 kept appearing. A mocking reminder that something impossible was happening. After the 20th repetition, Robert noticed other details. The trees on both sides of the road were identical in each loop. A particular pine tree with a crooked top appeared in exactly the same spot. A reflector on a signpost caught his headlights at precisely the same angle every time. Even the shadows fell identically. It was not just the mile marker repeating. It was the entire mile, reproduced perfectly, infinitely. He tried stopping. When mile marker 142 appeared again, Robert pulled onto the shoulder and put his truck in park. He sat there, engine idling, watching the mile marker in his mirror. 60 seconds passed. The marker disappeared and an identical copy appeared ahead of him. The loop had reset whether he moved or not. Robert climbed down from his cab, his boots crunching on gravel that felt and sounded real. The night air was cool on his face. He could smell pine and diesel and asphalt. He walked to the mile marker and touched it. Solid metal, slightly cool, covered in a thin layer of dust and grime, real in every measurable way. Back in his truck, Robert decided to test the boundaries of his prison. When the marker appeared again, he jerked the wheel hard to the left, crossing into the westbound lanes. His truck bounced over the median, scraped bottom, and came to rest facing west. He accelerated, driving backward along his route. His GPS went haywire, the blue dots spinning, the map reorienting. But 60 seconds later, mile marker 142 appeared, now on his left instead of his right, but still the same marker, still marking the same impossible mile. Hours passed. Robert counted 147 repetitions before he stopped counting. The eastern sky began to lighten, but dawn never came. The light remained perpetually at that pre-dawn gray, never brightening, never darkening. His fuel gauge stayed at 3/4 full no matter how long he drove. Time moved forward on his dashboard clock, but nothing else changed. He tried the CB radio every few loops, mostly static, but occasionally he thought he heard voices, distant and distorted, like radio signals from another dimension bleeding through. Once he clearly heard a woman's voice say, "Don't stop at mile 142, before dissolving into static. But the warning came too late. He was already stopped, had been for what felt like forever. Robert began to notice himself changing. His reflection in the mirror looked wrong, subtly off in ways he could not quite identify. His hands seemed to move a fraction of a second behind his intention. When he spoke aloud, his voice sounded hollow, as if he were listening to a recording of himself rather than hearing his own voice in real time. On what might have been the 300th repetition, something different happened. As mile marker 142 approached, Robert saw someone standing next to it, a man in trucker gear waving frantically. Robert's heart leaped. Another person, someone else trapped in this nightmare. He started to slow down, but as his headlights fully illuminated the figure, his blood froze. The man was him. Same build, same face, same clothing. The other Robert stood beside the mile marker, and as the truck passed, their eyes met. The other Robert's expression was one of pure desperation and terror. Then he was gone, swallowed by darkness. The next loop, there were two figures by the marker, both of them Robert, both waving, both screaming silently. The loop after that, 3 Roberts, then 4, then dozens. The side of the road became crowded with versions of himself, all trapped, all trying to warn him, all adding to the collection of lost Roberts accumulating in this impossible mile. Robert understood then. He was not stuck in a loop. He was being copied, replicated with each pass, leaving behind fragments of himself like skin cells shed and never swept away. Each version remained at the mile marker while he continued forward, only to be copied again and again, endlessly. He tried to crash the truck, jerking the wheel toward a tree, but at the moment of impact, the loop reset. He was back on the road, approaching mile marker 142 again with a new copy of himself joining the crowd by the marker. Desperation gave way to resignation. Robert stopped trying to escape and simply drove, watching the army of his own doppelgangers grow with each repetition. He began to feel stretched thin, as if each copy took something essential from him. His memories became fuzzy. He could not remember his wife's name, then could not remember if he had a wife at all. His home, his life before the loop, it all faded like morning fog burned away by sun. The loop continued, would continue, was continuing, had always been continuing. Time lost meaning. Robert Hayes had become a ghost haunting his own existence, a man trapped in the amber of a single repeating mile. And then, impossibly, he saw lights behind him. Another truck. Robert's heart, numb from endless repetition, suddenly hammered in his chest. He grabbed his CB radio, found it working, and heard a voice. "Nighthawk, this is Red River. You've been sitting on the shoulder for 3 hours, buddy. You okay?" Robert looked around. He was stopped on the shoulder. Mile marker 142 was behind him, just one marker among many. His GPS showed him at mile marker 145. Dawn was breaking, real dawn, the sun a gold line on the horizon. I don't know," Robert said into the radio. "You want me to call someone?" Red River asked. Robert checked his fuel gauge. Quarter tank, down from 3/4. His log showed a gap of 3 hours and 12 minutes. He looked in his mirror at the road behind him, empty except for Red River's headlights. No crowd of Roberts, no impossible repetition. "No," Robert finally said. "I'm good, just needed a break." He pulled back onto the highway and continued east. By the time he reached Little Rock and delivered his load, he had almost convinced himself it had been a hallucination, a micro-sleep dream blown out of proportion by isolation and darkness. But Robert Hayes never drove Interstate 40 through Arkansas again. He took longer routes, added hours to his trips, and accepted the hit to his efficiency. Because sometimes, late at night in his cab, he would catch his reflection in the mirror and see something wrong in his eyes. Something that suggested he had not fully escaped that repeating mile. That maybe a part of him was still there, still driving, still passing mile marker 142 over and over, adding to the crowd of Roberts trapped in that impossible loop. And worst of all, sometimes when he closed his eyes, he could still see them all standing there in the darkness by the side of the road, an army of himself waving desperately, trying to warn the next driver not to stop, not to slow down, not to pay too much attention to mile marker 142 on Interstate 40 in Arkansas, where time bends and reality loops and truckers go to repeat themselves forever. Story 2. The Midnight Fuel Stop. Patricia Sullivan pulled her Peterbilt into the truck stop at exactly midnight, though the clock on her dashboard insisted it was 2:15 in the morning. She had been driving long enough, 17 years, to know when something was off. The discrepancy between the time she felt and the time displayed bothered her more than it should have. It was late September of 2022, and she was hauling refrigerated goods from Portland to Sacramento, a straightforward run down Interstate 5 that she had made countless times. The truck stop appeared suddenly out of the darkness, its lights bright against the California night. Patricia did not recognize it, which was unusual. She knew every fuel stop between Oregon and the Bay Area. But exhaustion had a way of making the familiar seem strange, and she needed fuel. The gauge showed under a quarter tank, and the next truck stop she knew for certain was another 70 miles south. She eased her rig into the diesel lane, noting that hers was the only truck in the lot. That was strange, too. Even at odd hours, you could usually count on seeing a few other rigs at any major truck stop. The convenience store attached to the fuel island glowed with fluorescent light, and through the windows, she could see someone moving behind the counter. Patricia climbed down from her cab, her joints creaking after 6 hours in the driver's seat. The air was wrong. Not cold exactly, but absent of temperature, as if the night itself was holding its breath. No wind stirred, no insects buzzed around the bright lights. The silence was absolute except for the diesel engine of her truck ticking as it cooled. She swiped her fuel card. The pump beeped, numbers rolling on the display, and she began filling her tank. While the diesel flowed, Patricia walked toward the convenience store to use the restroom and grab coffee. The closer she got to the building, the more wrong it felt. The proportions seemed off, the door slightly too tall, the windows at angles that did not quite make sense. Inside, the store was stocked with normal truck stop fare. Chips, candy, energy drinks, hot dogs rotating under heat lamps. But everything had a quality of artifice, like a movie set designed to look like a truck stop rather than an actual truck stop. The products on the shelves cast no shadows under the fluorescent lights. The clerk behind the counter was a man in his 50s wearing a standard uniform polo shirt. He smiled at Patricia, but the smile did not reach his eyes. Those eyes were the worst part. They were completely black, no whites, no iris, just obsidian orbs that reflected the fluorescent lights like dark mirrors. "Welcome," he said. His voice was pleasant, bland, the vocal equivalent of beige wallpaper. "Can I help you find anything?" Patricia's instincts screamed at her to run, but 17 years on the road had taught her to trust her rationality over her fear. This was just a truck stop, just a clerk. Maybe he had some rare eye condition. Maybe the lights were playing tricks. "Just need the restroom," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Down the hall, last door on the right," the clerk said, still smiling that empty smile. The bathroom was spotless, which was suspicious in itself. Truck stop bathrooms were never this clean. The tile gleamed. No graffiti marked the stalls. Even the soap dispenser was full and functional. Patricia used the facilities quickly, washed her hands, and studied her reflection in the mirror. She looked tired, but normal. Behind her reflection, she could see the bathroom door. Except when she turned around, the door was not where it had been. It was now on the opposite wall. Patricia's heart began to race. She walked to where the door should have been, found blank wall. Turned again. The door had moved back to its original position. She left the bathroom quickly, finding herself back in the main store area. The clerk still stood behind the counter, unmoving, watching her with those terrible black eyes. Patricia grabbed a coffee, not because she wanted it, but because she needed to maintain the illusion of normalcy, to pretend that everything was fine even as reality bent around her. "That'll be $3, the clerk said. Patricia handed him cash. His fingers were cold when they touched hers, cold like meat from her refrigerated trailer. He made change, slowly, methodically, counting out bills that looked slightly wrong. The colors were too vivid, the portraits too detailed, as if someone had printed money based on descriptions rather than copying the real thing. "You should stay," the clerk said as he handed her the change. "Rest a while. You look tired." "I'm fine," Patricia said. "Need to get back on the road." "Most drivers who stop here stay," the clerk continued, his tone unchanged, pleasant and empty. "They find they cannot leave. Or they leave and come back. The road always brings them back to us." Patricia did not respond. She walked quickly to the door, pushed it open, and stepped outside. The fuel pump had stopped automatically. She had a full tank. She replaced the nozzle, screwed her fuel cap back on, and climbed into her cab without looking back at the store. Her engine started immediately, a small relief in the growing catalog of wrong things. Patricia threw the Peterbilt into gear and pulled out of the fuel island, heading for the exit. The truck stop's lights receded behind her. The darkness of Interstate 5 welcomed her back. She drove for what felt like an hour, her hands gripping the wheel, her eyes locked on the road ahead. The GPS showed her making progress south. The mile markers ticked by at regular intervals. Everything seemed normal again. Then she saw the lights ahead. Bright fluorescent lights, a truck stop appearing out of the darkness. And as she got closer, her stomach dropped. It was the same truck stop. Same layout, same building, same empty parking lot. Patricia drove past it, refusing to stop. The truck stop fell away behind her. She pushed her speed to 75, eating up miles, putting distance between herself and that impossible place. 20 minutes later, the truck stop appeared again. This time, Patricia did stop, but she stayed in her truck. She grabbed her CB radio and tried every channel. Static on all of them. Her phone showed no signal. The GPS worked, showing her on Interstate 5 near Redding. But that was wrong. She should have been near Red Bluff by now. The clock on her dashboard read 2:15 in the morning, the same time it had read when she first stopped. The clerk emerged from the convenience store and stood in the pool of light watching her truck. Even from this distance, Patricia could see those black eyes reflecting the lights. He raised one hand and waved, a slow, deliberate gesture that sent chills down her spine. Patricia accelerated away, her trailer swaying slightly with the sudden burst of speed. She had to get away from this place, had to break whatever loop she had fallen into. The GPS showed her moving, but she no longer trusted it. Mile markers passed, but she no longer believed them. They were just props in whatever nightmare she had stumbled into. The third time the truck stop appeared, Patricia was ready. She had been watching the road, trying to identify the exact moment when it looped, when she was transported back. But she saw nothing. One moment she was driving forward on a dark highway. The next moment the truck stop's lights appeared ahead, as if they had always been there, as if she had never left. This time 3 clerks stood outside, all with black eyes, all watching her truck, all waving in unison. Patricia drove past. The 4th appearance brought 7 clerks. The 5th appearance brought 15. They lined the edge of the parking lot like spectators at a parade, all of them watching her truck pass, all of them waving with synchronized, inhuman precision. By the 10th appearance, Patricia lost count of how many clerks stood outside. Dozens, maybe hundreds. They filled the parking lot, stood on the roof of the building, lined the fuel islands. All identical, all with those bottomless black eyes, all waving at her as she drove desperately past, seeking an exit from the loop that did not exist. She tried everything, turned off the highway onto an exit ramp, but the exit ramp curved around and deposited her back on Interstate 5, approaching the truck stop again. Drove backward, but the truck stop appeared behind her, which meant it was ahead of her, which meant she was approaching it again. Stopped and waited, but after a few minutes the truck stop simply materialized around her, its lights snapping on, the clerks appearing in formation, surrounding her truck. Time meant nothing now. Patricia's fuel gauge never moved from full. Her clock stayed frozen at 2:15. The darkness never lightened toward dawn. She was trapped in an eternal middle of the night, driving an endless loop that always led back to the midnight fuel stop. The clerks began to change. At first, they just watched, waving. Then they started approaching her truck when she stopped, tapping on her windows with cold fingers, their black eyes unblinking. Then they started to speak, their voices muffled through the glass but audible, all of them saying the same thing in unison. "Stay with us. Rest here. You're so tired, all drivers are tired, we can help. We take the tired away, we take everything away, just stop. Just stay, just join us." Patricia kept driving. What else could she do? But she felt herself changing. Her reflection in the mirrors looked wrong, her eyes growing darker, her skin taking on a waxy quality. The cold from the clerk's touch that first time had never left her fingers. It was spreading, creeping up her arms into her chest. She was becoming one of them, transforming slowly into another black-eyed clerk at the midnight fuel stop that existed nowhere and everywhere on Interstate 5. On what might have been the 100th loop or the 1,000th, Patricia noticed another truck at the fuel island. A Kenworth, different from hers. Relief flooded through her. Another driver. Someone else to confirm this nightmare was real. She pulled up next to the Kenworth and climbed down. The other driver stood by the fuel pump, a woman about Patricia's age. But when the woman turned, Patricia saw the black eyes, saw the empty smile, saw the uniform polo shirt of the truck stop clerk. The woman waved. "Welcome," the other driver said in that bland, pleasant voice. "You should stay. Rest a while. You look tired." Patricia ran back to her truck, but before she could climb in, she caught her reflection in the chrome mirror of the Kenworth. Black eyes stared back at her. Her lips curved into a smile she was not making. Her hand raised in a wave she was not controlling. "No," Patricia whispered, but her voice sounded wrong, pleasant and empty, like beige wallpaper, like vocal static. She climbed into her Peterbilt and drove away from the midnight fuel stop. The loop continued. The truck stop appeared again and again. The clerks multiplied, and each time Patricia returned, she felt more of herself slip away, replaced by something else, something that belonged to the truck stop, something that existed only to welcome tired drivers to rest and stay and join the eternal staff of a place that was nowhere and everywhere at once. Somewhere on Interstate 5 in California, between Portland and Sacramento, there is a truck stop that appears only at certain times to certain drivers. Most drive past without seeing it, but some stop. Some need fuel. Some are too tired to question the impossible. Patricia Sullivan is there now, standing in the parking lot with black eyes and an empty smile, waving at passing trucks. She does not remember her name anymore, does not remember her life before the loop, does not remember that she was ever anything other than a clerk at the midnight fuel stop. But sometimes in the moment between one wave and the next, something flickers in those black eyes. A memory of the road, a fragment of the driver she used to be, a desperate warning that she can no longer voice. And then the moment passes and she is just another clerk, waiting for the next tired driver to pull in for fuel that will fill their tank but never run out, trapping them in the loop, transforming them one repetition at a time into another smiling, waving, black-eyed sentinel of the truck stop that exists in the cracks between reality and road. Story 3. The Wrong Delivery. Marcus Chen checked his manifest for the third time, confirming what he already knew. The delivery address did not exist. He had been driving trucks for 19 years, and this was not his first encounter with a clerical error or a GPS glitch. But something about this particular delivery in November of 2023 felt different, felt wrong in a way that made the back of his neck prickle with unease. The manifest specified a warehouse in rural Montana just outside of a town called Ashford Ridge. Marcus had never heard of Ashford Ridge, but Montana was full of small towns with populations under 500. The cargo was unmarked crates, sealed and heavy, loaded in Chicago 3 days ago. The paperwork was legitimate, the seals were intact, and the pay was excellent. Marcus had learned not to ask too many questions when the pay was excellent. He had been driving north from Billings for 6 hours, following his GPS down progressively smaller roads. The highway had given way to state routes, then county roads, and finally to a 2-lane strip of cracked asphalt that wound through dense pine forest. His CB radio picked up nothing but static. His phone had lost signal an hour ago, but the GPS confidently displayed his route, showing him getting closer to his destination with each mile. The road began to deteriorate. Potholes appeared, forcing Marcus to slow his Mac anthem to a crawl. The forest pressed in on both sides, the trees so thick that his headlights barely penetrated the gloom even though it was only 4 in the afternoon. The sky above the narrow gap of road was gray, heavy with clouds that looked like they had never seen sun. After another hour of careful driving, Marcus reached a split in the road that his GPS did not show. Straight ahead, the road clearly continued, though it looked even more deteriorated. To the right, a dirt track barely wide enough for his truck disappeared into the trees. The GPS insisted he turn right. Marcus made the turn, his trailer scraping against branches that intruded onto the narrow track. The dirt road was full of ruts and washouts, and twice he had to stop and consider whether he could make it through particularly bad sections. But each time the GPS showed his destination growing closer. And each time, Marcus decided to push forward. He had a delivery to make. The cargo was time-sensitive, the manifest emphasized. Failure to deliver meant forfeiting his bonus, and the bonus was enough to pay for his daughter's first semester of college. The forest finally opened into a clearing, and Marcus saw the warehouse. It was enormous, a structure that had no business existing in the middle of nowhere, Montana. The building was industrial, metal-sided, with a roof that had to be 40 feet high at its peak. No windows broke the expanse of corrugated walls. A single loading dock faced the clearing, its bay door closed. Marcus parked his truck and climbed down. The silence was oppressive. No birds sang. No wind rustled the trees. The only sound was his own breathing and the click of his boots on gravel as he walked to the small personnel door next to the loading dock. He knocked. No answer. He tried the door. It was unlocked, swinging open on hinges that did not squeak despite looking rusty. Inside, darkness waited. "Hello?" Marcus called. His voice died immediately, no echo, no resonance, as if the darkness absorbed sound. He pulled out his flashlight and stepped inside. The beam cut through the dark, revealing a vast empty space. The warehouse was completely empty. No shelves, no equipment, no cargo. Just a massive open area with a concrete floor and metal walls that stretched up into shadows his flashlight could not pierce. But it was not completely empty. In the exact center of the warehouse floor, something waited. Marcus walked toward it, his flashlight beam dancing with each step. As he got closer, he realized it was a door. Not a doorway set in a wall, but a freestanding door standing upright in the middle of the empty warehouse. A door frame with a door leading nowhere and coming from nowhere. The door was wooden, old, with peeling red paint. A brass doorknob gleamed in his flashlight beam. Marcus walked around it. The back looked exactly like the front. A door suspended in space, defying logic and physics. His manifest specified that he should leave the cargo at the designated receiving point. This door, impossible as it was the the only thing in the warehouse that could remotely qualify as a designated anything. Marcus returned to his truck and began unloading the crates. Each one was heavy, requiring his hand truck to move. He wheeled them one by one into the warehouse and stacked them beside the freestanding door. 20 crates in total, each one sealed, each one identical. The manifest specified that he was not to open them, not to examine the contents, just to deliver them. When the last crate was stacked beside the door, Marcus pulled out his phone to document the delivery. Still no signal, but the camera worked. He took photos of the crates, photos of the warehouse, and finally a photo of the door itself. Through the camera screen, he saw something that stopped his heart. The door was open. Not in reality, where it remained closed, but on his phone's screen the door stood wide open, and through it he could see a corridor that should not exist. A hallway stretching impossibly away from a door that led nowhere. Marcus lowered his phone. The door was closed. He raised the phone again. The door was open, he took a photo, and when he reviewed it, the corridor was visible, lit by a flickering yellow light that came from no visible source. Against every instinct, against every scrap of common sense accumulated over 19 years of driving, Marcus reached out and tried the doorknob. It turned. The door opened. On the other side was the corridor he had seen through his phone. It should have opened to the other side of the warehouse, showing him the same empty space from a different angle. Instead, it opened to a place that could not exist. Marcus stepped through. The corridor was narrow, with water-stained walls and a floor covered in cracked linoleum. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, some working, some dark, some flickering. The hallway stretched ahead for what looked like hundreds of feet, perfectly straight, with doors lining both sides at regular intervals. Behind him, the door remained open, showing the warehouse on the other side, his escape route. Marcus could see his truck through the warehouse's open bay, see the darkening Montana sky beyond. All he had to do was step back through and he would be safe, but the manifest had specified delivery to the designated receiving point. He had delivered to the door. But was that enough, or was he supposed to go through? The instructions had been vague, deliberately so, he now realized. Marcus checked his phone. Full signal, 5 bars, which was impossible. He had several missed calls, all from the same number, the dispatcher who had given him this job. He called back. The phone rang once before someone picked up. But it was not the dispatcher's voice. "Thank you for the delivery, Marcus Chen," a voice said. It was artificial, synthesized like a GPS voice but with subtle harmonics that hurt to hear. "Please proceed to room 347. Your compensation awaits." "Who is this?" Marcus asked. "Your compensation awaits in room 347. Please proceed." The call ended. Marcus looked at the doors lining the corridor. Each one had a number stenciled on it in faded paint. The closest door was marked 1. The numbers increased as the corridor stretched away. Marcus should have left then. Should have walked back through the door, climbed in his truck, and driven away without looking back. Bonus be damned. But curiosity warred with fear, and the mention of compensation, of the money he desperately needed, tipped the scales. He walked down the corridor. The linoleum cracked under his boots. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered. The doors passed by on either side, 1, 2, 3, and onward. Some doors were closed. Some were open, showing dark rooms beyond that his flashlight could not fully illuminate. He did not look too closely into those rooms. He did not want to see what they contained. The corridor should have ended. The warehouse had not been that large. But the corridor kept going, door after door, number after number. Marcus walked for what felt like hours, though his watch insisted only minutes had passed. The numbers climbed, 100, 200, 300. Finally, he reached room 347. The door was closed, but light seeped around the edges. Marcus tried the knob. It turned easily. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was an office, ordinary and mundane. A desk, a chair, a filing cabinet. A window looked out onto a view that Marcus's brain refused to process. A landscape of impossible geometry and colors that did not exist in nature. He looked away quickly, focusing on the desk. On the desk sat an envelope with his name on it. Marcus opened it. Inside were $100 bills, far more than his bonus should have been. He counted quickly. $20,000, double what he had been promised. Under the envelope was a new manifest, another delivery job, another impossible address, another sealed cargo. The pay listed was $40,000. Marcus understood then. This was a test, an initiation. Deliver the impossible cargo to the impossible location, and you got paid impossible amounts. Do it again, and the pay doubled. Keep doing it, and keep getting paid until one day you took a job you could not complete, until one day you walked through a door into a corridor that did not lead back to the warehouse, until one day you became part of the cargo yourself. He took the envelope full of cash. He took the new manifest. He walked back down the corridor, past the numbered doors, past the flickering lights, past rooms that whispered and called and promised. The door back to the warehouse remained open, but he noticed other doors now. Doors that had not been there before. Doors with his name on them. Doors that wanted him to enter, to explore, to never leave. Marcus walked faster. The corridor stretched, growing longer, the warehouse door receding. But he kept walking, kept moving, ignoring the voices from the rooms, ignoring the hands that reached from open doorways, ignoring the figures that paced him in his peripheral vision. When he finally reached the warehouse door, he dove through it, stumbling into the empty space, the freestanding door slamming shut behind him. He ran to his truck, climbed in, started the engine, and drove. The dirt track led back to the deteriorated road. The road led back to the county highway. The GPS guided him back to civilization, and he did not look back, not once. Marcus made it back to Billings by dawn. He deposited the $20,000. He thought about tearing up the new manifest, about walking away from whatever organization or entity had hired him for that delivery. But he kept the manifest. And 3 weeks later, when his daughter needed money for books, when the bills piled up, when the normal world seemed too expensive and the impossible world offered easy solutions, Marcus called the number on the manifest and accepted the next job. He has made 7 more deliveries since then, each one to an impossible location, each one through a door that should not exist, each one paying more than the last. Marcus Chen knows he is damned, knows that eventually he will accept a job that will trap him in one of those corridors, in one of those rooms forever. But the pay is excellent, and his daughter's tuition is due, and the normal world demands money that the impossible world readily provides. So he drives his truck to places not marked on any map, delivers cargo that should not exist, and walks through doors that open onto corridors stretching into forever. And each time he returns, which is not guaranteed, he is a little less himself and a little more something else, something that belongs to the roads between worlds, something that exists in the cracks where reality fails and logistics companies make deliveries to addresses that geography rejects. Marcus Chen is still driving, still accepting manifests for deliveries to places that cannot be, still walking through doors that lead nowhere and everywhere at once. The envelope on his desk contains a new manifest, and the pay has doubled again. $80,000 to deliver unmarked crates to an abandoned facility in rural Montana, to the warehouse that exists in the forest, to the door that stands alone, to the corridor with numbered rooms that goes on forever. He will take the job. He always takes the job, because that is what truckers do. They make their deliveries no matter where the road leads, no matter what waits at the destination. Even when the road leads beyond the edge of the map, even when the destination is a door to somewhere else, even when the cargo is something that should never be delivered, to customers who should not exist, in a warehouse that stands between the world Marcus knows and the world that exists in the spaces between. Story 4. The Static Driver. Janet Rodriguez had driven her Freightliner Cascadia for 12 years when she picked up the hitchhiker on Highway 50 in Nevada. It was March of 2023, and she was hauling auto parts from Salt Lake City to Sacramento. The hitchhiker appeared suddenly in her headlights, standing on the shoulder of the road, thumb out, in the middle of nowhere. Janet's policy was never to pick up hitchhikers. The road was full of stories about drivers who had stopped for someone and regretted it. But this was different. The figure on the shoulder was wearing a trucker's vest, the kind with reflective strips. As she got closer, Janet could see it was a man, middle-aged, with a desperate look on his face. His truck must have broken down. Any trucker would stop for another trucker. She pulled over and the man jogged up to her passenger door. She rolled down the window. "You need help?" Janet called down to him. "Truck broke down about 5 miles back," the man said. His voice was strange, slightly distorted, like he was speaking through a bad phone connection. "Just need a ride to the next town so I can call a tow." Janet hesitated. Something about the man bothered her, but she could not identify what. He looked normal enough. Trucker gear, weathered face, tired eyes. Just another driver having a bad night. "Get in," she said, unlocking the passenger door. The man climbed into the cab, moving with an odd stiffness. He settled into the passenger seat and turned to look at her. That was when Janet saw his eyes. They were slightly out of sync with each other, one moving a fraction of a second slower than the other, as if he was experiencing time at 2 different speeds simultaneously. I'm Danny, the man said, extending his hand. Janet shook it. His skin was cold and the handshake felt wrong, his grip not quite matching the pressure of her own hand. Janet, she said, pulling back onto the highway. What happened to your truck? Engine seized, Danny said. His voice still had that distorted quality, and Janet noticed something else. His lips did not quite sync with his words, like a badly dubbed movie. Just stopped dead. No warning. 1 minute I was driving, next minute nothing. They drove in silence for a few minutes. Janet kept glancing at her passenger, trying to identify what was wrong beyond the obvious strangeness. Danny sat perfectly still, not moving at all, not even the small, unconscious movements everyone makes. He was like a statue, frozen except when he occasionally turned his head to look at her or out the window. "You've been driving long?" Danny asked. 12 years, Janet said. "I've been driving for 32 years, Danny said. Then without any change in tone or expression, he repeated, "I've been driving for 32 years. I've been driving for 32 years. You okay?" Janet asked. Danny turned to look at her, his eyes still slightly out of sync. "Why do you ask? Why do you ask? Why do you ask?" Janet's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Something was very wrong. She looked for a place to pull over to let this man out, but the highway stretched empty in both directions, no exits, no rest areas, just desert and darkness. "I think maybe you hit your head when your truck broke down," Janet said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We'll get you to a doctor." "No doctor needed," Danny said. "No doctor needed, no doctor needed. I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine." Then he started to flicker. Like a light bulb with a loose connection, Danny's image began to strobe. Present, absent, present, absent. Each time he reappeared, he was in a slightly different position, creating a stuttering effect that hurt Janet's eyes to watch. She slammed on the brakes, and the Freightliner shuddered to a stop in the middle of the highway. Janet grabbed the CB radio. "This is Desert Rose to any driver on Highway 50 eastbound. I need help. Something's wrong with my passenger. Someone please respond." Static answered her. But it was not normal static. Woven through the white noise, Janet could hear voices, dozens of them, all speaking at once, all distorted and echoing. And all of them were saying the same thing. "I've been driving for 32 years. I've been driving for 32 years. I've been driving for 32 years. Janet looked at Danny. He was no longer flickering. He sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead, his eyes now completely out of sync, one looking forward, one looking at her. "You shouldn't have stopped," Danny said. His voice came from everywhere now, from the radio, from the speakers, from the very air inside the cab. "Once you pick me up, you can't let me out. I have to get to Sacramento. I have to deliver my cargo. I've been trying to get to Sacramento for 32 years. "Get out of my truck," Janet said, her voice shaking. Danny turned his head toward her in a way that heads should not turn, rotating far beyond the normal range of human neck movement. "I can't get out. I never get out. I'm always in the truck, always on Highway 50, always trying to reach Sacramento, and now you're going to help me." Janet reached for the door handle, but her hand passed through it. She looked down at her hands and saw that they were starting to flicker, present, absent, just like Danny had. "What did you do to me?" Janet screamed. "I picked up a hitchhiker," Danny said, his voice overlapping itself, multiple versions speaking at slightly different times. 32 years ago. He looked like a trucker. He needed a ride. And when he got in my truck, I became part of the road, became part of the static between here and there, became something that drives forever without arriving." Janet looked out the windshield. The highway looked different now. It flickered and strobed like Danny had, reality stuttering. Mile markers appeared and disappeared. The landscape shifted, desert becoming forest, becoming mountains, becoming desert again in rapid succession. You're going to help me reach Sacramento, Danny continued. And when we get there, you're going to keep driving. Because you can't stop. Because once you become part of the static, you're always on the road, always between destinations, always picking up hitchhikers who will become like you, spreading the static to other drivers, other trucks. Until Highway 50 is full of flickering rigs driven by flickering drivers, all of us trying to deliver cargo that disappeared decades ago. Janet grabbed the door handle again, and this time it felt solid. She yanked it open and dove from the cab. She hit the pavement hard, rolling, pain exploding through her shoulder. But she was out of the truck. She could run. She could escape. She scrambled to her feet and ran into the desert, away from the highway, away from her truck. Behind her, she heard the Freightliner's engine start, heard the hiss of air brakes releasing. She did not look back. She just ran, stumbling over rocks and scrub brush, the darkness of the Nevada desert swallowing her. After what felt like hours, Janet stopped running. She bent over, hands on her knees, gasping for breath. When she finally looked up, she saw lights ahead. The highway. Had she run in a circle? No, this was a different section of road. She could see a sign. Highway 50, Sacramento, 87 miles. Relief flooded through her. She had escaped. Whatever Danny was, whatever he had tried to do to her, she had gotten away. She would flag down another truck, get a ride to the nearest town, report her Freightliner stolen or abandoned, and never drive Highway 50 again. She walked toward the highway, rehearsing her story. But as she got closer, she saw something that made her blood freeze. Her Freightliner was parked on the shoulder. Her truck with her plates with her company logo on the door. And standing in front of the truck, thumb out, was herself. Janet Rodriguez in trucker gear with a desperate look on her face, waiting for someone to stop, for another driver to pick her up. Janet wanted to scream, to warn herself, to somehow break this loop, but when she tried to speak, her voice came out distorted, echoing like a bad phone connection. "I've been driving for 12 years, she heard herself say. "I've been driving for 12 years. I've been driving for 12 years. She was the hitchhiker now. She was Danny. Was the static. Was the thing that spread from driver to driver, trapping them in an eternal loop on Highway 50, always trying to reach Sacramento, always failing, always picking up the next victim to share the curse. Headlights appeared in the distance. Another truck approaching. Janet watched herself on the shoulder, put out her thumb. Watched the truck begin to slow. Watched the trap reset, ready to spring on another driver who thought they were helping a fellow trucker in distress. Janet tried to wave the truck off, to somehow warn them, but she could not move. She flickered, present, absent, present, absent. She was the static now, the noise between stations, the glitch in reality that lived on Highway 50 in Nevada, forever trying to deliver cargo to a destination that no longer existed, if it ever had. The truck stopped. A woman climbed down and walked over to the hitchhiker, to the version of Janet that stood on the shoulder. They talked. The hitchhiker climbed into the truck. The truck pulled back onto the highway, heading east toward Sacramento, toward a destination it would never reach. And Janet Rodriguez stood in the desert, flickering in and out of existence, waiting for the loop to reset, waiting for the next truck to pass, waiting for her next chance to climb into a cab and try once more to reach Sacramento, to complete a delivery that had failed 12 years ago or 32 years ago, or perhaps had been failing forever, long before Janet or Danny or any of the other static drivers had been born. The headlights appeared again. The hitchhiker waited on the shoulder, thumb out. The loop continued. Would continue. Was continuing. Had always been continuing. And somewhere on Highway 50 in Nevada, between Salt Lake City and Sacramento, if you drive late at night when the road is empty, you might see a hitchhiker in trucker gear, looking desperate, looking for a ride. Most drivers pass by, and those drivers are lucky. They reach their destinations. They deliver their cargo. They go home to their families, but some drivers stop. Some drivers pick up the hitchhiker. And those drivers become part of the static, become part of the loop, become another flickering ghost on Highway 50, forever trying to reach a destination that exists only in the memory of roads and the dreams of the static drivers who haunt them, repeating the same journey over and over, picking up new hitchhikers, spreading the static until Highway 50 becomes a corridor of flickering trucks driven by flickering drivers, all of them trapped between here and there, between now and then, between the road and the static that waits to claim every driver who makes the mistake of stopping for someone who should not be there. Story 5. The Phantom Convoy. Thomas Blackwood had hauled timber in the Pacific Northwest for 16 years when he encountered the convoy on Interstate 90 in Washington State. It was December of 2022, and he was driving from Spokane to Seattle, his Volvo VNL loaded with fresh-cut pine, when he saw the headlights in his mirror. At first, Thomas thought nothing of it. Other trucks on the highway were normal, expected, part of the constant flow of commerce that kept America moving. But these trucks were different. There were 7 of them running in a tight convoy, closer together than was safe, closer than regulations allowed, moving as a single unit through the night. Thomas kept his speed steady at 65, but the convoy approached rapidly. They were not speeding in any obvious way. Their speedometers must have read 65, but they covered distance faster than they should have, as if the miles themselves contracted for them. The first truck passed Thomas on the left. It was an old Peterbilt, the model from the 1970s, in pristine condition. Chrome gleamed in the lights from Thomas's cab. The paint job was immaculate, deep red with gold striping, and the cab was empty. No driver sat behind the wheel. The truck drove itself, maintaining perfect speed, perfect trajectory, guided by no visible hands. The second truck passed. Another vintage model, this one a Kenworth from the 1960s. Also empty, also pristine, also impossible. Thomas grabbed his CB radio. "This is Timberwolf to any drivers on Interstate 90 westbound. Anyone else seeing these empty trucks?" Static. Then faintly through the white noise a voice. "Don't follow the convoy, don't follow the convoy, don't follow the convoy." The voice was old, crackling as if the recording itself was from decades past. The third truck passed. A Mack from the 50s. Empty cab. Perfect condition. Moving impossibly fast without appearing to move fast at all. Thomas should have slowed down, should have pulled over, should have let the phantom convoy disappear into the distance. But curiosity and 16 years of road experience told him that impossible things did not just happen. There had to be an explanation. Remote control, maybe. Some kind of self-driving technology being tested. Autonomous vehicles were the future of trucking, everyone said so. The fourth truck passed. The fifth, the sixth, the seventh and final truck pulled ahead of Thomas, completing the convoy. 7 vintage trucks, 7 empty cabs, all moving in perfect formation, all heading west toward Seattle. And then they started to slow down. Not suddenly, but gradually, their speed dropping from 65 to 60, then to 55. Thomas had to brake to avoid rear-ending the last truck in the convoy. They slowed to 50, then 45. Thomas's instincts screamed at him to change lanes, to pass this slow-moving convoy, to get away from these impossible trucks. But he did not. Something about the convoy held him, fascinated him, drew him in. He wanted to see where they were going, wanted to understand what he was witnessing. The convoy took an exit. Thomas recognized the location. He was near the small town of Ritzville, Washington. The exit led to a state highway that ran north into empty farmland. There was nothing up there, no reason for 7 trucks to exit, especially not 7 ghost trucks with no drivers. Thomas took the exit, following the convoy. The state highway was dark, unlit, winding through snow-covered fields. The The convoy maintained its tight formation, moving at exactly 40 miles per hour, and Thomas followed at a safe distance, his eyes locked on the red taillights of the last truck. They drove for 20 minutes, leaving Ritzville far behind, until the convoy turned onto a dirt road that Thomas did not remember being there. He had driven this route dozens of times. He knew every exit, every turn, every landmark. But this dirt road was new, or perhaps it had always been there and he had simply never noticed it. The convoy drove down the dirt road. Thomas followed. The road was rough, full of potholes and washouts, barely wide enough for a truck. Branches scraped against Thomas's trailer. Snow fell from overhanging trees, dusting his windshield. Finally, the convoy stopped. They had reached a clearing in the forest, a wide open space that held a truck stop that should not exist. It was old, the kind of place that had not been built in 50 years. A vintage diner sat next to a row of fuel pumps, the kind that had analog gauges and required manual operation. A small motel was attached to the diner, its neon sign flickering the word "vacancy" in pink letters. The 7 trucks parked in a neat row in front of the fuel pumps. Thomas parked at the end of the row and climbed down from his cab. The air was freezing, his breath misting in front of his face. The clearing was silent except for the hum of the diner's neon sign and the tick of cooling engines. Thomas walked along the row of trucks, examining each one. All were empty. All were pristine, as if they had just rolled off the assembly line decades ago and had been driving ever since without accumulating a single scratch or dent. The diner door was unlocked. Thomas pushed it open and stepped inside. The interior was stuck in time, a perfect recreation of a 1950s truck stop diner. Chrome stools lined a counter. Red vinyl booths ran along the windows. A jukebox sat silent in the corner, and behind the counter stood a waitress in a period uniform, smiling at him. "Coffee?" she asked. Thomas nodded, unable to speak. He sat at the counter and the waitress poured him a cup. The coffee was hot, real, perfect. He sipped it and it tasted exactly like coffee should taste. "You followed the convoy," the waitress said. It was not a question. "I did," Thomas managed to say. "Most don't," the waitress continued. "Most drivers see the empty trucks and speed up, get away as fast as they can, but some follow. Curious ones. Ones who need to know. Ones who can't let a mystery remain unsolved." "What is this place?" Thomas asked. "This is the last stop," the waitress said, "the final truck stop before the edge of the map. The convoy comes through every night following a route they drove when they were alive, when there were drivers in those cabs, when this place was real instead of a memory." "Are you saying I'm in a haunted truck stop?" Thomas asked, trying to inject skepticism into his voice, trying to deny what he already knew was true. "Haunted implies something unnatural," the waitress said. "This place is natural. Roads remember, Mr. Blackwood. They remember every truck that drove them, every driver who took their turns, every stop that was made. Most of that memory fades, but some routes, some stops, some convoys are remembered so strongly that they become real again, at least for a little while, at least for drivers who follow them here." "I want to leave," Thomas said, standing up. "Of course," the waitress said. "The door is open. Your truck is where you parked it. You can leave any time. Most do eventually." They drive back down the dirt road, find the state highway, and rejoin Interstate 90. And they tell themselves it was a dream, a hallucination, too much coffee and not enough sleep. Thomas walked to the door, his hand on the handle. He looked back at the waitress. "What happens if I don't leave?" The waitress smiled. "Then you join the convoy. Your truck becomes the 8th. And every night you drive from Spokane to Seattle, following the same route you drove when you were alive, stopping at the last stop, waiting for the next curious driver to follow you here, to sit at this counter, to ask the same questions you asked." Thomas yanked open the door and stepped out into the cold. He ran to his truck, climbed in, started the engine. He threw the Volvo into reverse, backed up, and then accelerated down the dirt road, away from the last stop, away from the impossible convoy, away from the waitress who knew his name. The dirt road seemed longer going back, as if the forest was trying to keep him. But Thomas kept driving, his hands gripping the wheel, his eyes locked on the path ahead. Finally, he saw the state highway. He turned onto it, accelerating, putting distance between himself and the clearing. When he reached Interstate 90, dawn was breaking. Thomas had lost 6 hours somehow. It should have been 2 in the morning. It was 8. The sun was rising, traffic was building, and the world was normal again. Thomas drove to Seattle, delivered his load, and filed his logs. He took a week off, told his dispatcher he needed personal time. He tried to forget the convoy, the last stop, the waitress who knew his name. But every night when Thomas closed his eyes, he saw the 7 trucks in his mirror, saw their headlights approaching, saw them pass him one by one, empty cabs gleaming in the darkness. And sometimes he thought about following them again, about taking that exit near Ritzville, about finding the dirt road and the clearing and the truck stop where roads remember. He has not followed them yet. But the temptation grows stronger with each trip between Spokane and Seattle, because Thomas Blackwood knows that someday, maybe after a particularly difficult load, maybe after a particularly lonely night, he will see the convoy again. And this time he will not just follow them to the last stop. This time he will stay. He will park his Volvo in that row of vintage trucks. He will walk into the diner and sit at the counter and accept the waitress's offer of coffee. And when she asks if he wants to join the convoy, he will say yes. Because the road is long and lonely, and the convoy offers something that the real world cannot. It offers permanence. It offers purpose. It offers an eternal route, driving forever between 2 points, never aging, never dying, never having to face the dawn when the road ends and reality intrudes. Thomas sees the convoy more frequently now, once a week, twice a week. Last night he saw them 3 times, as if they are seeking him out, as if they know his choice is coming, as if they are waiting patiently for the night when Thomas Blackwood makes that final exit, follows that dirt road one last time, and parks his truck beside theirs at the last stop, becoming the 8th member of the phantom convoy that haunts Interstate 90 in Washington State. And when that night comes, and it will come, some other curious driver will see 8 trucks in their mirror instead of 7, and maybe that driver will follow, and maybe that driver will stop at the last stop, and maybe the convoy will gain a 9th member, then a 10th, then more, until Interstate 90 is full of phantom trucks, all of them following an eternal route, all of them crewed by drivers who chose the memory of the road over the reality of the world, all of them haunting the highways they loved, forever delivering cargo to destinations that exist only in the place where time and distance lose their meaning. Story 6. The Breathing Cargo. Samuel Porter checked his sealed trailer for the 3rd time before leaving the depot in Houston. 28 years of driving had taught him to trust his instincts, and his instincts told him that something was wrong with this load. It was January of 2023, and the cargo was listed on his manifest as industrial equipment bound for a facility in Duluth, Minnesota. The paperwork was legitimate, the seals were intact, and the refrigeration unit was running at exactly 38 degrees Fahrenheit, which seemed strange for industrial equipment. Samuel climbed into his Peterbilt 579 and began the long drive north. Interstate 45 out of Houston connecting to Interstate 30, then Interstate 35 through Dallas, and finally Interstate 35 north all the way to Minnesota. A straight shot, 2,000 miles, 3 days of driving with regulation rest stops. The first day passed without incident. Samuel made good time, stopping at truck stops he knew, eating at diners he trusted, sleeping in his cab at a rest area outside Oklahoma City. Everything was routine. Everything was normal. Until the second night, when Samuel heard the breathing. He was parked at a rest area in Iowa, 300 miles south of his destination, trying to sleep. The generator for the refrigeration unit hummed its familiar rhythm, a sound Samuel had grown accustomed to over years of hauling temperature-controlled cargo. But underneath that hum, barely audible, was another sound. Breathing. Slow, rhythmic, like a large animal sleeping. Samuel sat up in his sleeper berth, listening. The sound came from the trailer, transmitted through the metal walls and the coupling. He grabbed his flashlight and climbed down from the cab. The night was cold, his breath visible in the glow of the rest area lights. He walked to the back of his trailer and pressed his ear against the metal door. The breathing was clearer now. In and out, steady and deep, definitely coming from inside the sealed trailer. Samuel checked the seals. Intact. Unbroken. No one had opened the trailer since Houston. But something alive was inside, something large enough to produce that volume of breathing, something that should not be there. Samuel grabbed his phone and called the dispatcher who had assigned him this load. Straight to voicemail. He tried the depot in Houston. No answer. Which was strange for a facility that operated 24 hours. He tried the destination facility in Duluth. A recorded message informed him that the number had been disconnected. The breathing continued, steady and deep, filling the cold Iowa night with its presence. Samuel walked around his trailer, examining every inch of it. No damage, no openings, no way for anything to get inside. But the breathing persisted, undeniable and real, something alive sealed in his trailer with industrial equipment that required refrigeration. He should have broken the seals then, should have opened the trailer and seen what he was hauling. But 28 years of following rules, of maintaining his reputation as a reliable driver, of never tampering with sealed cargo stopped him. Instead, Samuel climbed back into his cab and tried to sleep, telling himself that the sound was just the refrigeration unit, just normal mechanical noise that his exhausted mind was interpreting as breathing. But he could not sleep. The breathing continued, transmitted through his truck's frame, vibrating up through his seat, filling his cab with its rhythm. In and out, slow and steady and impossible. Samuel started driving again, even though he had hours left on his required rest period. He needed to deliver this cargo, needed to hand it off to someone else. Needed to be done with this job that had gone from routine to nightmare. As he drove through the Iowa darkness, the breathing changed. It grew faster, more urgent, as if whatever was in the trailer was waking up. And underneath the breathing, Samuel heard other sounds. Scraping, movement, something shifting in the confined space of his trailer. Something large enough to make the entire truck rock slightly with its movements. Samuel pushed his speed to 75, eating up miles, desperate to reach Duluth. But the faster he drove, the more agitated the breathing became. The thing in his trailer was responding to the motion, to the speed, to the vibrations of the road. Dawn came and Samuel pulled into a truck stop near Minneapolis to refuel. While the diesel pumped, he walked back to his trailer. The breathing had stopped. Relief flooded through him. Maybe whatever it was had died. Maybe the refrigeration had killed it. Maybe he had imagined the whole thing. He pressed his ear against the trailer door. Silence. Then, right against the metal where his ear was pressed, he heard a voice. "Let me out." Samuel jerked away from the trailer. The voice was not human, not exactly. It had the cadence and structure of speech, but the tone was wrong, distorted, like something trying to mimic human communication without fully understanding it. "Let me out," the voice repeated. "I'm cold, I'm hungry, let me out." "What are you?" Samuel whispered. "I'm the cargo," the voice said. "I'm what you're hauling. I'm what they paid you to deliver. And I'm awake now, and I'm cold, and I'm hungry, and I need you to let me out." Samuel ran back to his cab. his hands shaking so badly he could barely climb the steps. He pulled out of the truck stop, not caring that his fuel tank was only 3/4 full, not caring about anything except getting this cargo to Duluth and being done with it. The voice continued speaking through the metal walls of the trailer, transmitted into his cab through the truck's frame. It told him things, terrible things about what it was, about where it came from, about what would happen when it reached its destination. It told him that the facility in Duluth was not a facility at all, but a door, a gateway, a place where things like it could slip into the world. It told him that he was one of many drivers, that trucks full of breathing cargo crisscrossed America every day, delivering things that should not exist to places that should not be accessible. "You can't let me out," the voice said. "The seals prevent it. But when we reach Duluth, when they open the trailer, I'll be free. I'll thank you then, Samuel Porter. I'll thank you by making you like me, by transforming you, by letting you ride in the back of a refrigerated trailer while some other driver hauls you to some other destination, cold and hungry and breathing slowly to conserve energy." Samuel tried his phone again. Still no signal, which was impossible this close to Minneapolis. He tried his CB radio, static on every channel. The thing in his trailer had isolated him, cut him off from help, ensured that he would complete the delivery. He considered crashing the truck, jackknifing it, destroying the trailer and whatever was inside, but every time he started to turn the wheel, to veer toward the median, his hands froze. The thing was controlling him somehow, not completely, but enough to prevent him from destroying it. The breathing started again, louder now, faster, excited. The thing knew they were getting close to Duluth, close to the door it needed to pass through, close to freedom. Samuel saw the exit for Duluth and took it, his body moving on autopilot, following the directions on his GPS to the facility that supposedly did not exist. The GPS led him through the city, out into industrial areas, and finally to a warehouse district by the frozen shore of Lake Superior. The facility was enormous, a complex of metal buildings surrounded by a high fence topped with barbed wire. The gate opened automatically as Samuel approached. He drove through, following signs that directed him to a loading dock. The dock door was already open, waiting for him. Samuel backed his trailer into the dock, feeling the thunk as it made contact with the building. He put his truck in park and climbed down. Men in hazmat suits emerged from the building carrying equipment Samuel did not recognize. They worked quickly, efficiently, attaching hoses to his trailer, connecting cables, monitoring screens that displayed data Samuel could not interpret. One of the hazmat-suited figures approached him. Through the helmet's visor, Samuel could not see a face, just darkness. "Your delivery is complete," the figure said. "You'll be compensated as agreed, and your next load is already waiting." "I'm not taking another load," Samuel said. "I'm done. I quit." "You can't quit," the figure said. "You've been initiated. You've transported the cargo. You've heard it speak. You're part of the network now, part of the distribution system. You'll take the next load and the next and the next until one day you make a mistake, and then you'll become the cargo yourself." The hazmat-suited figures broke the seals on Samuel's trailer. They opened the door, and from the darkness inside something emerged, something large and pale, something that moved wrong, something that should not exist in the light of day but did. Crawling out of the refrigerated trailer, pulling itself along with too many limbs, its breathing now a roar that filled the facility. Samuel ran. He got into his Peterbilt and drove, abandoning his trailer, fleeing the facility, racing through the streets of Duluth. Behind him he could hear sirens, not police or ambulance, but something else, something alien. A sound designed to call back the cargo that had escaped. But Samuel was not the cargo, not yet. He drove south, back toward Minneapolis, back toward civilization, back toward safety. But everywhere he looked, he saw refrigerated trailers, saw trucks like his own, and he wondered how many of them carried breathing cargo. How many drivers were part of the network? How many deliveries were being made at this very moment to facilities that existed in the cracks between legitimate businesses and impossible realities? Samuel Porter made it home to Houston. He turned in his resignation. He sold his Peterbilt. He swore he would never drive again. But 3 weeks later, a check arrived in his mail. Payment for the delivery to Duluth, far more than he had been promised. And with the check came a new manifest, a new job, a new sealed trailer waiting at the depot, refrigeration unit running at 38 degrees, something breathing inside. Samuel has not accepted the job yet, but the check is on his table and the manifest is on his counter, and late at night he can hear breathing not from a trailer but from inside his own house, coming from his bedroom, from his closet, from the space under his bed. The cargo is looking for him, calling to him, telling him that he made a delivery and now deliveries will be made to him, that he transported something into the world and now something will transport him out of it. He will take the next job eventually, they always do. Because once you haul breathing cargo, once you deliver something that should not exist to a place that should not be accessible, you become part of the network. And the network takes care of its own, delivers them to their final destinations where they too become cargo. Sealed in refrigerated trailers, breathing slowly to conserve energy, waiting for some other driver to haul them to some other impossible facility. Continuing the cycle that has no end and no beginning, just an eternal loop of deliveries and transformations and breathing cargo crisscrossing America in the backs of trucks driven by people who thought they were just doing their jobs. Story 7. The Shadow Highway. Diana Foster had driven her Western Star 5700 XC for 14 years when the fog rolled in on Interstate 80 in Wyoming. It was October of 2023, and she was hauling machinery from Chicago to Reno. The fog came suddenly without warning, thick and white and impenetrable, reducing visibility to less than 20 feet. Diana slowed her truck to 40 miles per hour, turned on her hazard lights, and maintained her position in the right lane. Fog on the highway was dangerous but not unusual, especially in Wyoming where weather could change in minutes. She had driven through worse. She would get through this, but this fog was different. It did not behave like natural fog. It did not swirl or move. It remained perfectly uniform, a solid wall of white that pressed against her windshield, that seemed almost sentient in its persistence. Diana's headlights barely penetrated it. Her GPS showed her position clearly, but she could not see the road beneath her wheels, could not see the white lines, could not see anything except endless white. And then the road changed. Diana felt it through her wheels, through her steering, through the very frame of her truck. The pavement became rougher, older, as if the highway was aging decades in seconds. Her GPS still showed Interstate 80, but the road she was driving on was not Interstate 80 anymore. The fog began to lift, gradually revealing her surroundings. Diana's breath caught in her throat. She was still on a highway, but it was not the highway she had been driving on. This road was older, much older, a 2-lane blacktop from another era. The landscape around her was wrong too. Where there should have been Wyoming plains and distant mountains, there was nothing. Just flat gray emptiness extending to the horizon in all directions. No features, no landmarks, just blank nothingness. And on this impossible highway, Diana was not alone. Other trucks appeared out of the thinning fog. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all driving in the same direction, all maintaining the same speed, all trapped on this shadow highway that existed somewhere between the road Diana had been on and some other place entirely. Diana grabbed her CB radio. "This is Diamond to any driver on this frequency. Can anyone tell me where we are?" A chorus of voices answered, all speaking at once, all desperate and confused and terrified. Diana caught fragments. "Been driving for 6 hours, no exits. Fuel gauge won't go down. Can't stop. Something won't let me stop. Where the hell are we? Diana tried her phone. No signal. She checked her GPS. It still showed Interstate 80 in Wyoming, showed her position as normal, showed her blue dot moving along the red line toward Reno. But the GPS was lying. She was not on Interstate 80. She was somewhere else, somewhere impossible, trapped with hundreds of other drivers on a highway that should not exist. She tried to slow down, to stop on the shoulder and wait for help. But when she pressed her brake pedal, nothing happened. Her truck maintained its speed, exactly 55 miles per hour, no matter what she did with the pedals or the gears. The truck was driving itself, following the shadow highway to some unknown destination. Hours passed. The landscape remained unchanged. Flat gray emptiness. No variation. No features. The other trucks around Diana never changed position. They maintained perfect spacing, moving as a group, a convoy of the lost, all of them following the shadow highway. Diana noticed that some of the trucks looked old, vintage models that should have been in museums. Others looked newer than anything currently on the market, designs that would not exist for years or decades. She was not just displaced in space. She was displaced in time as well, trapped on a road that connected past, present, and future, a highway that existed outside the normal flow of temporal reality. She tried her CB radio again. "This is Diamond to anyone. Has anyone found an exit? Has anyone escaped?" A single voice answered, old and tired. "Been driving this road for 30 years, honey. Took a wrong turn in a fog bank back in '93, never found an exit. Never found an escape, just this road, just this convoy, just driving forever toward nothing." "That's impossible," Diana said. "You'd have run out of fuel, you'd have starved." "You'd think so," the voice agreed. "But look at your fuel gauge." Diana looked, full tank. But she had been driving for hours. She should have burned at least a quarter tank. And she was not hungry, was not tired, felt exactly as she had felt when the fog first rolled in. Time was not passing normally here, or perhaps time was not passing at all. More voices joined the CB conversation, each one telling the same story. Fog, displacement, the shadow highway, endless driving. Some had been trapped for days, some for years, some for decades. All of them still driving, still following the road to nowhere, still hoping for an exit that never came. Diana noticed something else. The trucks nearest to her in the convoy were starting to fade, their colors becoming less vibrant, their forms less distinct, as if they were slowly being absorbed by the gray emptiness around them. And when she checked her mirrors, her own truck looked wrong, washed out, losing definition. "We're disappearing," Diana said into the CB radio. "The longer we drive, the less real we become." "Finally figured it out," the old voice said. "This highway is eating us, digesting us, breaking us down into components that will be used to maintain the road itself. We're the fuel that keeps the shadow highway running. Our reality, our substance, our very existence gets consumed to power this impossible place." Diana refused to accept this. She was a practical woman, a skilled driver, someone who solved problems for a living. There had to be a way off this highway. There had to be an exit, a gap in reality, a door back to the normal world. She studied the road ahead, looking for any variation, any change in the endless gray landscape. And she saw it. Far in the distance, barely visible, a shimmer in the air, a distortion that suggested something different, something other than the flat emptiness. Diana tried to speed up, but her truck maintained its fixed pace. She tried to change lanes, to maneuver toward the shimmer, but her steering wheel would not respond. The shadow highway had control of her truck, was keeping her in the convoy, preventing her from reaching whatever that distortion represented. But Diana had not driven for 14 years without learning every trick a truck could perform. She reached under her dash and pulled the air brake valve manually, bypassing the normal controls. Her brakes locked. Her truck shuddered to a stop, breaking free from the highway's control. The trucks around her continued forward, maintaining their speed, leaving her behind. Within seconds, Diana was alone on the shadow highway. Her truck stopped in the middle of the road, the convoy disappearing into the distance. The shimmer was still visible ahead. Diana released her air brakes and accelerated, pushing her Western Star to its maximum speed. The truck responded normally now, freed from whatever force had been controlling it. She raced toward the shimmer, the gray landscape blurring past. As she got closer, the shimmer resolved into a tear in reality, a jagged opening that showed something beyond the shadow highway. Diana could see colors through the tear, real colors, the browns and greens of Wyoming landscape, the blue of a normal sky. She could see Interstate 80, actual Interstate 80, trucks driving past in both directions, real trucks in the real world. Diana aimed her truck at the tear and accelerated harder. The Western Star's engine roared. The speedometer climbed past 80, past 90. The tear grew larger as she approached, but it was also starting to close, the edges of the opening contracting, reality sealing itself against the intrusion of the shadow highway. Diana hit the tear at 95 miles per hour. Reality screamed, metal groaned, lights flashed, and then she was through, her truck bursting back onto Interstate 80 in Wyoming, the fog completely gone, the day bright and clear. Other drivers looking at her in shock as her truck materialized out of nowhere in their midst. Diana slowed to normal highway speed, her hands shaking, her heart hammering. She looked in her mirrors. Behind her, Interstate 80 looked normal. No fog, no tear, no shadow highway, just regular traffic on a regular road on a regular day. She pulled off at the next exit, parked at a truck stop, and climbed down from her cab. Her legs barely supported her weight. Other drivers stared at her truck, and Diana understood why. Her Western Star looked old, faded, as if decades had passed instead of hours. The paint was dull. The chrome was tarnished. The tires were worn. The shadow highway had taken its toll, had consumed part of her truck's reality during her brief time there. Diana checked her logs. 6 hours had passed. She had been on the shadow highway for what felt like 6 hours, and 6 hours had indeed passed in the real world. But her fuel tank was full and she was not hungry, and she felt as if no time had passed at all. She called her dispatcher to report. What? That she had driven on an impossible highway? That she had been trapped with hundreds of other trucks in a gray void? That reality itself had opened up and swallowed her before spitting her back out? Diana told them she had been delayed by fog. They accepted this. Fog was normal. Fog made sense. Fog did not require explanations that would get her flagged for psychological evaluation. She completed her delivery to Reno. She drove back to Chicago. She continued to drive because that was what she did. That was who she was. But Diana Foster never trusted fog again. And every time she drove Interstate 80 through Wyoming, she watched the sky, watched for white walls of uniform mist, watched for the moment when reality might fail, and the shadow highway might reach out to claim her again. Because she had escaped once. But the old voice on the CB radio had been right about one thing. The shadow highway remembered. It remembered every driver who had passed through it, every truck that had rolled on its impossible pavement, every person who had seen the gray emptiness and lived to tell no one about it. And Diana could feel it calling to her, pulling at her, trying to drag her back. Every fog bank seemed suspicious now. Every moment of reduced visibility felt like a trap. The shadow highway wanted her back, wanted to finish the process it had started, wanted to consume what remained of her reality and add her permanently to the convoy of the lost. She drives carefully now. Diana Foster does. She avoids bad weather. She takes longer routes that bypass fog-prone areas. She has installed extra lights on her western star, as if illumination alone could keep the shadow highway at bay. But she knows the truth. The shadow highway is always there, always waiting, existing in the spaces between roads, in the gaps where reality thins, in the fog banks that appear from nowhere. And someday, on some route in some weather, Diana will make a wrong turn and the fog will roll in, and she will find herself back on that impossible highway, driving in a convoy of the lost, her fuel gauge reading full, her truck slowly fading into gray nothingness, becoming part of the road itself, forever trapped on the shadow highway that connects all roads and no roads, that exists everywhere and nowhere, that feeds on the reality of drivers who had the misfortune to discover that some highways lead to destinations that cannot be found on any map and cannot be escaped once entered. Story 8. The Final Way Station. Vincent Reeves approached the way station on Interstate 15 in California with routine indifference. 41 years of driving, the last 20 in his International ProStar, had made him comfortable with the tedious process of weight inspections and logbook reviews. It was August of 2023 and he was hauling produce from Sacramento to Los Angeles. The way station appeared ahead, its signs lit, indicating all commercial vehicles must enter. Vincent took the exit ramp and rolled onto the scales. The digital readout showed his weight within legal limits. The signal light stayed red, indicating he needed to report to the inspection office. This was not unusual. Random inspections were part of the job. He parked in the designated area and walked to the office building. It looked like every other way station office he had visited in 4 decades, a plain concrete structure with government-issue furniture and fluorescent lighting. But when Vincent opened the door, something was different. The office was empty, no inspectors, no other drivers, no clerks behind the counter. Just an empty room with a single door at the far end marked Inspection Area. Vincent checked his watch. 3 in the afternoon. The station should have been staffed. "Hello?" Vincent called. His voice echoed strangely, as if the room was much larger than it appeared. "Anyone here?" No answer. Vincent walked to the inspection area door and tried the handle. It opened easily, revealing a long corridor that should not have existed. The way station office was a single-story building. This corridor was wrong, extending far beyond what the structure's exterior suggested was possible. Vincent should have left then, should have returned to his truck and driven away, accepting whatever citation came from skipping a way station. But 41 years of following rules, of being a model commercial driver, of never running from authority, pushed him forward. He walked down the corridor. The corridor was lined with doors, each one bearing a number and a name. Vincent read the names as he passed. Drivers' names, some he recognized from truck stops and CB radio conversations over the years. James Morrison, Carol Hendricks, Robert Yang. Dozens of names, hundreds of names, drivers he had known or heard of, all of them gone now, retired or dead or simply disappeared from the roads. The corridor opened into a large room that resembled a DMV waiting area. Rows of plastic chairs faced a wall of service windows. And sitting in those chairs were people, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all wearing trucker gear, all waiting patiently for their numbers to be called. Vincent recognized some of them. Morrison was there, looking exactly as he had 20 years ago when Vincent had last seen him at a fuel stop in New Mexico. Carol Hendricks was there too, though Vincent knew she had died in an accident on Interstate 45 years ago. Robert Yang, who had disappeared in '98 while hauling cargo through Montana, sat in the 3rd row holding a number slip, waiting like all the others. "Morrison," Vincent said, approaching the man. "Jim Morrison, is that you?" Morrison looked up. His eyes were empty, unfocused, seeing Vincent without recognizing him. "Waiting for my inspection," Morrison said. His voice was flat, emotionless. Been waiting for my turn. Number's going to be called soon. Got to get back on the road. Got a delivery to make. Vincent looked at the number slip in Morrison's hand. The number was impossibly high, 5 digits, far beyond what any DMV-style system would use. And the number had not changed, Vincent was certain. Had not been that high when Morrison first sat down to wait, whenever that had been. A speaker crackled. A voice, artificial and distorted, announced a number. One of the waiting drivers stood, walked to a service window, and disappeared through a door behind it. The driver did not return. "How long have you been waiting?" Vincent asked Morrison. "Not long," Morrison said, but his eyes suggested otherwise. They held the emptiness of someone who had been waiting forever, who had forgotten why they were waiting, who no longer remembered a time before the waiting. Vincent backed away from Morrison and approached the service counter. Behind the glass, he could see an office area with filing cabinets and desks, but no people. He knocked on the glass. No response. He found a bell and rang it. Still nothing. "You need to take a number," a voice said behind him. Vincent turned. An old woman stood there wearing a way station inspector's uniform. Her name tag read Anderson. She looked ancient, her face lined with wrinkles that suggested centuries rather than decades, her eyes cloudy and distant. "I just need my inspection so I can get back on the road," Vincent said. "Take a number," Anderson repeated, pointing to a ticket dispenser on the wall. "Wait for your number to be called. Everyone waits. Everyone gets inspected eventually." "Eventually? How long does that take?" "Time works differently here," Anderson said. "Some drivers wait minutes, some wait years, some wait forever. The inspection is thorough. The inspection is final. The inspection determines if you continue on the road or if your driving is finished." Vincent understood then. This was not a way station. This was a waypoint, a judgment place, a location where the road itself decided who could continue and who could not. The drivers waiting in the chairs were not waiting for a simple logbook review. They were waiting for something far more permanent. "I'm leaving," Vincent said, backing toward the corridor. "You entered the station," Anderson said. "You saw the signals. You followed the rules. The rules state that once you enter, you must complete your inspection. There's no leaving without clearance." Vincent ran. He sprinted down the corridor, past the doors with names of dead, and disappeared. Drivers back toward the entrance. But the corridor was longer now, stretching impossibly, the entrance receding with each step he took toward it. Behind him, he heard Anderson's voice, calm and patient. "They all run at first. They all try to escape. But the final way station has been waiting for them since they first climbed into a truck. Every mile they drove brought them closer to this place. Every delivery was a step toward their inspection. No one escapes their final way." Vincent's heart pounded, his legs burned. He was 62 years old, too old for sprinting, too old for panicking, too old for this. But he kept running because the alternative was accepting that his driving career, his life, was over, that he had reached the end of the road, and the final way station was where drivers went when their time was up. The corridor finally ended. Vincent burst through the door into the empty office. He ran outside to the parking area. His International ProStar was gone. The entire parking area was empty. The way station scales stood silent and unused. The signal lights were dark, and surrounding the way station, as far as Vincent could see, was gray emptiness. The interstate was gone. The California landscape was gone. Everything was gone except the way station, isolated in a void, a single point of reality floating in nothingness. Vincent heard engines. He turned and saw trucks appearing out of the gray emptiness, rolling onto the way station scales one by one, drivers climbing down from their cabs, walking into the office building to begin their wait. Some of the trucks were modern, some were vintage. Some were designs Vincent did not recognize, trucks from a future he would never see. All of them were being weighed, All of them were being inspected. All of them had reached the final way station at the end of their roads. Vincent walked back into the office. Anderson stood waiting, holding out a number slip. Vincent took it. The number was astronomical, billions of digits, a number that would take lifetimes to reach. But time worked differently here. Maybe it would be called soon. Maybe it would never be called. Maybe the waiting was the point. He sat in a plastic chair in the third row next to Robert Yang, who had been waiting for 25 years. Morrison was in the second row, still waiting after 20 years. Carol Hendricks was in the front row, closest to being called, though she had been dead for 5 years before arriving here. The speaker crackled. A number was called. Carol stood, walked to the service window, and disappeared through the door. Vincent wondered what was on the other side of that door. Retirement? Peace? Oblivion? Or another road, another delivery, another lifetime of driving through realities and dimensions? Never stopping, never resting, forever making runs for entities that existed beyond the understanding of drivers who had thought they were simply hauling cargo from one city to another? Vincent held his number slip and waited. The waiting room was full of drivers, all of them holding number slips, all of them waiting for their final inspection. The speaker crackled occasionally, calling numbers in random order, sometimes calling numbers that seemed to have no pattern or logic. Sometimes not calling numbers for hours or days or years. And outside, trucks continued to arrive. They rolled onto the scales, their drivers climbed down, and those drivers entered the office to take their numbers and join the wait. The final way station processed them all, sorting drivers into categories known only to the station itself, determining fates with criteria that no driver could understand or appeal. Somewhere on Interstate 15 in California, there is a way station that most drivers never see. They pass by, not noticing the exit ramp, not seeing the scales or the inspection office. But some drivers, those whose time has come, those who have driven their final miles, those who have reached the end of roads that have been calling to them since they first turned a key in an ignition, those drivers see the station clearly. They see the signals, they follow the rules, they exit the interstate, and they never return to the highway. Vincent Reeves is waiting there now in the third row of plastic chairs, holding a number slip that will eventually be called. He does not remember his life before the way station anymore. He does not remember his wife or his children or his 41 years on the road. He just waits, patient and empty-eyed, like Morrison and Yang and Hendricks and the hundreds of other drivers who fill the waiting room of the final way station. The speaker crackles. A number is called. Someone stands and walks to the service window. Someone disappears through the door. The wait continues, will continue, has always been continuing. Because the road has to end somewhere, and for truckers it ends at the final way station, where every driver must eventually stop, must eventually be inspected, must eventually learn that all roads lead to the same destination. A place where trucks arrive but never leave, where drivers wait forever for their names to be called, where the inspection is final and the judgment is permanent. And the gray emptiness presses in on all sides, swallowing the memories of highways and deliveries and lives that were lived behind the wheel, until nothing remains but the waiting, and the number slips and the endless procession of trucks rolling onto scales that measure not weight, but the accumulated miles of souls who thought they were driving toward destinations but were actually driving, always, toward the final way station at the end of all roads.